Joining us today at Post Wrestling, one of the godfathers of professional wrestling podcasters. You can see him this coming Sunday, part of Double or Nothing, and he's launching a brand new show, Wrestling Anonymous, that we're going to be chatting about. A pleasure. Welcome back here to Post Wrestling, Colt Cabana. Colt, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you two? Two of my favorites. Hope you're well. I've asked a lot and said a lot right there. So, hi.
Well, on behalf of myself and Wei Ting, we have got one of two vaccine shots up here in Canada. That's the state of Canada right now. We're slowly catching up to our American counterparts, but we're getting there. We're starting to see a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, obviously with AEW, there's a lot of Canadians in the locker room, so that's kind of always a piece of conversation is how, I don't want to say slow, but behind the Canadians are when usually they're so forward thinking and everything else, right?
It was going really slow. It seems like over the last few weeks, it's really ramped up now. So that's been a positive, but yeah, very, very slow going at the beginning, just regarding vaccines and such.
Well, we're at AEW, we're very grateful that everyone's able to come across the border and participate in the shows. I think we're urgent care needs or whatever we are. We're essential workers, the old wrestlers, aren't we?
As things are starting to open up that much more and you're going to be seeing independents starting to run more and more shows, are you looking like you're just itching to get back to your old schedule? Like, how are you going to be approaching once things start to open up, like after this past year?
Well, just like you, everyone, this pandemic has kind of, brought my attention to how everyone kind of acts and reacts to this thing. And I didn't really know how I would react, but naturally, I've become very anxiety driven in a world where I usually had zero anxiety or any of that. So I'm one of those people with the masks on and I'm really believing in the science, and that's just kind of how my brain works. And it's not like I was swayed, anyway, but
it's very reassuring to hear.
Yeah, but I'm a little scared, to be honest. I'm not jumping right into anything. People have been offering, and I've just kind of been taking it slow, which is crazy. You guys know me well enough. Is back in the day before pre-pandemic, I'm taking everything. I'm trying to work as much as possible, and right now, I think the pandemic and the quarantine has given me a realization of like, I can do things at home. I can make money at home. I could be on Twitch. I can podcast. Gratefully, I have this contract with AEW, and maybe I don't have to hustle as hard. But one thing I do miss is the live crowds. So I will be itching to wrestle and perform in front of a live crowd that's in front of us. With AEW, it's been amazing. But of course, you'll see on television there, like outside of the bowl. The AEW wrestlers are kind of inside the bowl. So it's hard to connect with those fans for me personally. And I look forward to connecting with them close, but hopefully, with masks on or whatever it might be.
I'll say for a lot of people, especially creatives, like this whole period, it's been terrible. But, in some cases, it's allowed us to maybe explore ways of creating that we haven't, and of some, all the wrestlers. I mean, I feel like you would be one of the most well equipped to expand. So, how have been some ways that you have done that over the past year?
Yeah, very early, I did a quarantine series for the Art of Wrestling, and which made me very happy because when it was very scary and no one knew what was happening, I was able to pay some of the independent wrestlers, a fee for doing a podcast, sponsored by Blue Chew at the time, so which was nice. And I started doing Instagram stories, and I started having guests on Instagram stories, and then through that, I would chop those up into YouTube clips or YouTube videos and try to monetize on that. And also, like, I enjoyed the process of making a 60-minute Instagram live where I would talk with people. And I enjoyed the process of making in that to like the best of or the highlights. And then I've jumped on Twitch, and I've been loving Twitch. I think it's so much fun. There's a great little community there. Some of the same names always come into my chat, and we've all kind of adopted the same sense of humor, which is, that's the fun thing about Twitch is kind of it's the humor led by whoever the creator is. And so a real sarcastic, snarky, way of looking at life and games. And I'm not much of a video gamer, but I've enjoyed getting into video games. That's something I've always said I wanted to get into games. I just didn't know where to start or how to do it. And so the quarantine has allowed me to do that. And now, of course, the biggest thing here is starting Wrestling Anonymous, which I haven't done a weekly podcast, since the Art of Wrestling. And, the Art of Wrestling has kind of been in seasons the last couple of years. But now I'm going straight ahead, weekly podcasting, taking anonymous Google Voice messages from people with weird, bizarre, fun, any kind of story in wrestling. And I'm kind of the curator. I'm the host. So I love that process too, because there's an editing process and a producing process to that too, which a lot of people might think that like, oh, you're just calling and you're throwing up these phone calls. It's like, no, I'm sifting through them. I'm also editing them. And I'm also, I'm picking the ones that would make a good story. And there's a lot to that. And I'm really enjoying it. And I just I love the idea of it. I'm very excited about it. I love the nostalgic aspect of in 50 years that these calls will be there for somebody. I think recently John Arezzi has put up like his own radio clips.
Yeah, his old
right?
archives. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's just something to like being able to hear those old fans from 1987 or whatever be like, can't believe they're giving Paul Orndorff a push or whatever it is. It's just so fun to hear a fan's perspective. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. And I'm enjoying it for the now, but there's a part of me who loves the romance of the nostalgia who will enjoy it in 10 or 20 years.
So the process is that fans have this number that they can just call in and they share the stories, and then you will be going through the stories and presenting a finished product on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And episode 1 is up already. And I titled it Grandpa Haku because my favorite call from the beginning is this guy who brought his child to a show, and Haku is like, I want to hold your 1-year-old child. And Haku's just playing with the little kid and stretching his little hands and like I don't know, caressing a child the way you wouldn't think of the monster killer Haku. And then at the end, Haku's like, I'm going to train you. You come and live with me. One day I'll make you the best wrestler ever. And we all have these stories. We all have these weird stories. And for years, people asked me to, fans asked me a lot to be on the Art of Wrestling. And it was hard to be like, this isn't a fan's show. It's for the wrestlers. It's a locker room chat. And so now, and for all those years, hearing people knowing they had good and fun stories, but it wasn't the platform. I love that this can be the platform now.
If you're listening to this concept and maybe not sure of like, how will this play out? One of the best podcasts I heard this year was the New York Times, their daily podcast. They did one episode where it was all centered around a similar idea where people that are, I think it focused mainly on parents during the pandemic being at home with their children. And they just had this line with the New York Times to call in. They could vent. They could share what they're going through. And it was unbelievable, the depth of what these people were willing to share with no one else on the other line, just to get this out of their system. It was unbelievable to me. Like, it was really eye-opening of like what people have inside that they just want to share to anybody on the other side.
And I think that's the importance of the anonymity. I don't know if that's the word of the
anonymity. Yes.
Anonymity. There it is. Is that right? It is that it's just, you're just letting it out and you're venting it out. And on the first episode, there's a couple, I've gotten a bunch of calls about family deaths and friends deaths. And there was one about a tag team partner that had called up and was like he called up and he's like, called his old partner. And it was like, we want to, I think we should start back up. And a couple of weeks later he had passed. And this caller talks about that process and the grieving process. And of course, what wrestling, it all ties into wrestling. I think one of the there's a lot of influences for this show over the years, but I think one of them was a podcast I used to listen to called Love and Radio. And they once did a wonderful story on Adrian Street. And I recommend going to find that. But Love and Radio had a hotline podcast. So it wasn't every week, but every now and then they would just call. The host would host an anonymous hotline calls, kind of in a similar way. And I always love that episode. And I think there's a weekly aspect to it. So right. I think it's bigger than wrestling. Like you said, the New York Times and NPR type radio is kind of what I'm drawing from here. And I think that's important too for me, is that, I've always tried to differentiate, and I've always tried to make the music that I want to listen to. I've always been the wrestler that I would want to watch, and I've always been the podcaster that I would want to listen to. And I think this is something that really hasn't been done on a grand scale for professional wrestling. And so just like the Art of Wrestling, when I said, who's going to do this show? Oh, I guess I'll do it. The same thing has happened.
It seems incredibly like rare these days to have like new concepts, at least, in the wrestling space when it comes to podcasting, where it seems like everything is either an interview or a review show. So I commend you for, continuing to like trying to see what else is available out there with the medium. When you are taking anonymous calls, do you have any concern about perhaps trolls or perhaps stories that people are going to make up? Is there a vetting process for some of this stuff?
Yeah, I'm the vetting process. And, if you can make up an unreal story that makes me believe it, well, then I guess it's making the show. But also, like, I've sifted through so much BS as a wrestler over the years. I feel my brain is good enough to work that way and to figure out what's real and what isn't. And again, yeah, I mean, I guess you can send something that's made up, but I feel it's kind of weird. And if it's good enough, I'll put it on the show because it's probably a good enough story, and it's a storytelling podcast. One thing I am going to be, I have to think about is, I guess, and obviously this is nothing I want to talk about, but, I had an issue with my last show and a court date and a trial. So I want to be very careful about kind of liable stuff. And so, that's one of the reasons why anonymous works for me, but, detracting names, if anyone's kind of taking anyone down anonymously, it probably won't make the show.
And not going and revisiting all of that, but I have to imagine like that took a great toll, I would imagine, on your passion for this, which is going to fuel someone to be able to do a weekly podcast and keep moving forward. It's a lot of work that goes into it. Did you sort of need that time to just, step away from the weekly commitment? Because that was a significant ordeal that was on your shoulders for several years.
Yeah, a lot of trauma was done there, and a lot of work has been done to try to help move past the trauma. But I probably not even thinking about it, but probably deep in my brain somewhere, I probably did need to take a step back, and also, I still want to do Art of Wrestlings, but kind of leave that behind. The Art of Wrestling podcast feed is still up, and I will do talks with my friends from time to time, but that grind was so rough. And of course, with that stuff happening, it's nice to kind of hit the refresh button, the restart button. And it's nice that I've been able to do that. I'm still in wrestling. I love wrestling, but it's been a great restart for me. I'm with AEW now. It's such a great promotion. I'm having the time of my life. I love being in the locker room. It's a fun locker room. And I love the access I'm allowed to do stuff like this. I'm able to podcast. I'm able to Twitch. I'm encouraged to Twitch, which is fun. And I'm encouraged to podcast, and all at the same time, being an AEW wrestler and star and coach. And it's been great.
What was the process? Because I really enjoyed the Road Diaries series that you were doing for a while. Like, these were, for those that hadn't heard them, like pretty much weekly kind of behind the scenes audio documentaries of you on the road. And I can only imagine how intensive those were to put together every week. But tell me a bit about that process for you, because I thought they were really well done.
Yeah, I guess in podcasting, you're hoping that something catches on and becomes like the next big thing. And a little bit of me thought, this isn't something being done by wrestlers. The audio vlog, with a post-produced audio podcast. And so I thought maybe it had the potential to really catch on. I talked to Ethan Page about this because I know his struggles, because every week he has to get out his camera and he has to film people, and you're like, you don't want to bother people. That's something that a lot of people don't think about is we don't think about, like, hey, can I film you? And the first time is great, but maybe after the 20th time, like, people are annoyed by it. So it's a fine line between that. So that was something too that although I didn't mind recording people while I was at shows and recording myself, it's just a fine line of like constantly being like, hey, can I record you for my podcast? And then I don't want to be in the locker room known as the guy who's just like, here's Colt. I guess he's probably going to want a podcast, like he's going to want to get an audio clip for him. So, that was rough. It wasn't as bad as, the art of wrestling. I had to, grab somebody for, it was a 2-hour ordeal while at a show or on the weekend. So that was even harder to grab somebody's time. So what makes me happy about this is that it's just a Google Voice number. I'm not bothering any of my friends, and I could just kind of produce it and edit it by myself on the road or on an airplane or at home. And so that's the main thing, is that I'm not really asking too much of any of my wrestling friends. I'm asking of you, the wrestling fans.
What's interesting is, I mean, now I feel we're talking about a generation of wrestlers, influenced by people such as yourself and the work that you've done, who, I mean, it feels like everybody kind of has their own vlog or some sort of like podcast or something that they're going to be doing in the back. And so I am just kind of curious, in AEW, is there sort of a backstage culture where like everybody is willing to help each other out? Or is it more like, is there a lot of concern amongst people about not wanting to bother others, especially when it comes to video work, which is, which everybody seems to be doing now?
Yeah. And then, right now Cody has the ultimate vlog backstage because they're filming a reality show.
That's right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And, and there was an email sent out being like, hey, we've got this, there'll be a camera. They'll be very mindful of you. And the last couple of weeks that, I've seen the cameras, but like, they're great. It's a great crew. They don't bother anybody. And that's the best part. I think that it's just in everyone's mindset. Like, we know being the elite's a big deal, and Sammy's vlog and people and Ethan's vlog, and people are, that's part of the business now. And so it's just out and about, and everyone seems to ask, permission. And I think everyone wants to help everybody. Not that I got like yelled at, but I'm kind of getting a label now because I like to, like, when my friends find out that I work for AEW, or I find out that, like, if someone like loves the Young Bucks or loves Kenny Omega, I'm never afraid to be like, hey, Kenny, will you say happy birthday to Charlie? He's 8. Or will you sign this thing for, this Pride charity or whatever it is? And I think it's because I have, over 2 decades and I'm very comfortable with all of my wrestlers and all of my friends, that I'm able to do this. But I love the fact that we can change lives and it takes 1 second. And so I feel a lot of my friends feel the same way. And everyone's always, Matt Hardy's someone who's always happy to film a video for a little kid who found out, through my real life friend's mom that I was a wrestler or whatever it is, and can't believe it. And so I love doing that stuff. And I feel a lot of the wrestlers, like you said, it's a kind of a newer generation, and it seems that everybody's okay with it. But, I think naturally everybody is aware, not, especially in wrestling, because that's the culture, is, not to piss anybody off. And a lot of people are on eggshells just in general, not necessarily at AEW, but that is a general thing. So people are aware and cautious, but it is an open, friendly place that I think everyone's willing to kind of do anything for anyone, which is cool. But also I look at a different aspect. I'm not one of these rookie wrestlers. I've been around for so long, so I feel very confident and comfortable. So I can't speak for the person who's a 3-year wrestler who's on Dark, who isn't contracted, who has a vlog but is scared to do it. So I have to look at it from their end too.
Yeah, it almost feels like now, if you're someone breaking in and you are that 3-year wrestler, like, this is such a huge part of the game. And I looked at just kind of the mentality of maybe some of your forward-thinking wrestling schools that could be introducing a lot of like this kind of technical training that, we can spend all these hours in the ring, but it's also video editing. Like, that's a huge part now. Like, it's pretty much, you're no longer an outlier. It's like, this is kind of mandatory that you are trying to get a presence for yourself out there, and it can be very difficult.
Yeah, but as I teach when I do wrestling classes or whatever it is, you have to be great at wrestling. Like, you can get over with the video stuff, but if you're not over in the ring or know the aspects of wrestling, it's not going to last. And we've seen that with so many people. So people do come to me. People do want me to teach like social media and that kind of stuff for wrestling classes. But I believe that the fundamentals are so important before any of this stuff. And yes, and I tell people that want to get into wrestling, I say, learn Spanish, learn Photoshop, learn editing, learn all these things. They're going to be the best tools for you to move your career forward, like they did for me. But boy, you know, being the wrestler is the most important part. And, you know, I was there when I saw the Young Bucks turn, you know, they turned everything, but because at that time they were such great wrestlers, and then they figured out the social media part or whatever it is. So that's number one. But I don't know if it's ready to be a class yet, or maybe like an extra class or
that's what I'm saying. Like it's an add-on. Like it is a part of the entire equation. If you're taking us back and you're 21-year-old Colt Cabana in 2021, how would you be utilizing Twitter for yourself? Because I think like it seems to be a common theme that once you get to a certain level, it's like the toxicity is very, very demanding and people taking a bit of a step back. But it's for that younger audience, like how would you be utilizing something like Twitter in this very, very, very tribal nature that it is today?
I mean, I think I use it the same way that I use it today. And I think I did use it the same, you know, I guess when I was 30 and I started on Twitter, is just the same way I want to be the podcaster that I want, you know, that I like to listen to. I want to be the Twitterer that I like to follow. You know, I follow the people that I like to see their tweets, and those are the people. That's how I would form how I tweet. So I don't like people on Twitter that post every second. You know, I either mute them or don't follow them. I don't like people who are constantly, you know, hitting on people, not sexually, but like, you know, knocking people down, taking people down a step. So I mean, these are just social media stuff that I do not like and I do not follow. And it's the practice that I don't follow either. So I tweet the same way that I like to follow on Twitter. And I think I would be the same way in my youth too.
I'm curious, because something that I often think about is just the path to monetization when it comes to, you know, content creation. It's you know, so often so many ideas can really come about it, but to be able to turn it into, you know, finances, and to be able to turn it into solid money is a whole different, almost like something you kind of have to stumble into at times, because there's so many different ways of doing it. I'm curious for you with, like, you know, this new project and maybe some of your other projects. Are you even thinking about that at this point, or are you just kind of doing what feels good creatively?
What feels good creatively. And, you know, same with when I started the Art of Wrestling, I knew that there would be success to it, but I didn't think of it in terms of monetization. And same with wrestling. Like I knew that there would be success to wrestling, you know, if I stuck with it when I was 18 years old, but I just never thought of the money aspect. And this is the same. I'm trying to be I don't want to lie to you and say it's not, you know, fully for monetization, because I know I now have the tools to realize how it's done. And yes, I'm trying, you know, hopefully this podcast becomes huge and that happens, but also I love the concept and I love the work and I love the hustle of it. So for me, it's not like trying to get that money. And I remember being at a wrestling convention with Eric Bischoff, and this was very early when I was still, you know, me, Jericho, and Stone Cold maybe were the only ones with a podcast. And he was like being like, well, if I can't make six figures, there's no point. And I was just like, well, then what do you, I don't know what to tell you. Like I started a thing, it took off, and now I make some money, but like, you know, it was passion driven. I can't help you. I don't know what to tell you. And luckily, you know, I guess I don't know what 83 weeks does, but I'm sure he does fine. If not good enough, otherwise he probably wouldn't be in the space. So, but for me, like everything, it's not trying. Yeah. And also as a wrestler, I stick to like how I grew up in wrestling, making $20, making $30. I feel, to me, like making $30 is amazing, you know? So when I see on YouTube that I made $20 from a video, I jump for joy. I think that's so cool. And then, you know, when you've put up 1,000 videos and if they make $20, then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this stuff kind of adds up. And that's the exciting part for me, is making it. And then, like, you know, maybe a couple of years later, you see like, whoa, hey, I make money at this. This is nice.
I wanted to ask you about the interview you just put out with Orange Cassidy, and kind of going into an interview like that. And, you know, for me, like when I do interviews, like I go back to one where this was back when he was with WWE, and it was one of those WWE phoners with Cody Rhodes. So I'm prepared to do this interview with Cody Rhodes. I get on the phone and it's like, I'm on the phone with Stardust, and I pretty much have to think on the fly. I can either just be really difficult here and the interview is going to be terrible. But what I ended up doing was pretty much asking every question I wanted, but into this, knowing it's this character I'm talking to. And it ended up, I was really proud with this thing by the end of it. And I don't say that about all my interviews, but I was very happy with how that turned out. And I would imagine for you, with your comedy background and such, that an interview like that presents a bit of a challenge that comes with it, but also like a very different spin. So I'm just curious, like, how you approach an interview like that, where it's like, it's not like one of your traditional sit down one-on-one interviews with one of your buddies.
Yeah. Well, I knew what I was getting into with that.
Yeah.
And it was essentially set up as a sketch, a comedy sketch. And it was done as a commercial to get people to go to Wrestling Anonymous. I did get a phone call from my mother going, "Oh, I just listened to that. Or he was so difficult to work with." And she's like, he has no energy, and I found it very funny. So yeah, for me, that was kind of, I knew what I was getting into. I knew what it was. And I wanted to have, I don't know if you're familiar with the Gallagher interview with Mark Maron.
Yes, I've heard that one. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of infamous where Gallagher just walks off, and it's an interview that just went wrong. And it's, it's kind of made lore in the WTF podcast history or whatever. So that was kind of my idea, was to kind of have that type of interview for Art of Wrestling, which is something I never had. It's always been my friends. And of course, Orange Cassidy is my friend, but this is something that I thought would be fun. We could do it kind of quickly in the back at AEW, and it would help me promote my new podcast, Wrestling Anonymous, at Podcast Now.
If it was an out of character interview with Orange Cassidy, I think I would have been disappointed. Like, he's somebody who I want to like only see play this character, maintaining this sort of illusion. And I thought like that interview gave you exactly what you wanted out of an Orange Cassidy, like, quote unquote, Art of Wrestling podcast. Yeah.
It's great. So it's great that I love it. I love that he keeps it. He doesn't, I asked him like once, like, is this something you'd be interested in? He's like, absolutely not. And I know other podcasters have asked and not. And he told me afterwards, he goes, that was the most I've ever talked in a podcast interview or anything. I was like, really? You didn't talk at all. So
how would you, like, I know, like, obviously you're a very different character, but for someone like Danhausen, and he gets on Conan O'Brien's podcast, I mean, at what point, like, do you preserve the integrity of this character when you get such an incredible platform? Like, that's always kind of an interesting balancing act for people who choose to really be so attached to the character and not let the facade down.
Yeah. And I think, there was giant, like ESPN, or even like, don't quote me on that. But something like ESPN or even bigger platforms that wanted to do stuff with Orange Cassidy. And he was like, no. And then that's why you'll see Chuck and Trent with him, is they'll take over the talking, and they wanted just Orange Cassidy. He's like, sorry.
Yeah. That's
having like, spent so much time now on BTE, and especially with the Dark Order, who, are pretty much the stars of that show at this point. Do you have any more insight into maybe their creative process, maybe what makes it work for them? And really, like, if you don't mind discussing maybe some of the behind the scenes of how you guys put those segments together.
Sure. Do you want like the BTE, the overall stuff, like other people, or?
Well, I guess I wanted to maybe get a sense of maybe you now being inside BTE, getting a sense of how they put the show together, but as well as the individual Dark Order segments.
Yeah, it's still a lot of Brandon Cutler is there, and he does a lot of work, and he deserves his 2 contracts. He's always running around he's editing, and I think Nick still does a lot of editing too. And what I love is that the Bucks know that even though they're on national television and international superstars, they know that being the elite is kind of what got them to the dance and brought it all together, and they take a lot of pride in it, and which is really nice. And it's still a mom and pop thing for the most part. It's Brandon running around with the camera and like a Bose microphone or whatever it is over it. And sometimes they'll get like the real production people to help with some of the editing, but for the most part it's Brandon and it's Nick Jackson. And I don't know if I'm supposed to tell this, but Hangman is a great editor too, so he'll help out too every now and then. And they're still part of that, like, elite circle. They all help each other out. And for us, for me, because I wasn't necessarily supposed to be in the Dark Order, but circumstances have kind of led to that. I've held now a permanent place there, and they had their thing going, and it was hard for me to want. I didn't want to jump in too early with them and be like, I'm taking over, I'm the guy, or not the guy, but like I'm the haha guy and I have ideas. So I was very quiet, and I kind of slowly eased myself in and found a place because, John and Alex and Uno and Stu, they all did such a great job of really going from nothing to something. They really made themselves, which is very important. And it's something really that they should have a tip of the hat to for making themselves on that show. And so I slowly wanted to ease myself into it. And there's a group text and there's a group chat and everyone's throwing ideas around. And it's a lot of improv. It's a skeleton of an idea. And then we just kind of turn it on and people just put in jokes that they've written or put in jokes that are kind of improv. And that's always the fun part, is to watch everybody kind of improv and be fun. It's a really fun group. And I obviously John is very funny and Alex is very smart. And Alex will make a great producer one day. A lot of people don't give Alex Reynolds a lot of credit, but he's a very smart mind and has a creative mind too. And I there's something that I don't know, maybe Uno does get a lot of credit, but he's very quick-witted and very funny. And I really enjoy working with all of them.
Us Canadians, we're very quick on our feet.
Yeah, I don't want to give you credit, but I will.
It's really incredible how like that sort of system has brought out so much personality from everybody attached to that thing. And yeah, like specifically, even like somebody like Stu Grayson, who really you would have had no sense of personality wise, I think has really come out of his shell. So that's great.
Well, Colt, let's give everyone the opportunity, if you want to get the number out, that they can call in for Wrestling Anonymous. And also, I mean, you can subscribe to Wrestling Anonymous. The first episode is up now.
Yeah, it's a Google voicemail, 87 Cabana 34. I like to say Emery Moorhead, who was my buddy's dad on the Chicago Bears. He was number 87, Cabana 34, Kirby Puckett, my favorite baseball player of all time. And put it in your phone. And so I'm hoping as we start going to more shows, people will have experiences. And if you have an experience, give a call, and you could do it on the moment. So it doesn't have to be one call. If something cool happens in the moment or in the past, give a call. And this is a very it's an easy show to listen to. So, I mean, I hope you listen every single week, but it's also something you could just drop into. And if you need, to kill a half hour on the treadmill or whatever it is, you can also kind of just drop into and listen at any time. So Wrestling Anonymous, wherever you listen to your podcast, Double or Nothing is coming up. I'm going to be in the Battle Royal. I'm very excited. I love the opportunity to be on pay-per-view, to be in the show. I love to be a part of the show. There's a lot of huge matches. It's very exciting. AEW is on fire. We're by ourselves. I was going to say we're by ourselves now on Wednesday night, but now I think we're going to be on Friday night this week. And there's a lot of stuff with the NBA playoffs, and then of course the move to TBS, which is coming. So it's an exciting time to be a wrestling fan, and I love being a part of it.
The King of Spades in the Casino Battle Royal.
Yeah, everybody was given the graphic with them as King of Spades, but I thought it would be fun on my Twitter to say that I was the King of Spades, even though everybody has the same graphic.
Well, Colt, thanks so much for jumping on with us, having this extended chat with us. All the best of success with the podcast. I know a lot of people are going to be very intrigued by this new format, and it sounds like a really, really interesting concept that we look forward to checking out.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, I love what you guys do. It's so great. It's a great, you guys are a great success story in pro wrestling, and you're two of the best. So congratulations and keep it up.